Chapter 9. A Reason for Secrecy. Here's a quote. There are two rules in life. One, never give out all the information. End quote. Unknown. So, what if we put aside our skepticism for a moment and imagined that a lot of these supernatural encounters actually are happening? And these spirits are, in fact, beings from technologically advanced futures and different timelines. A thought experiment. Imagine that they're coming back here for various reasons to mess with us and our timeline. What would this look like? Short story, The Secret. The thought of it just sickens me, Rachel said. Mom, you'll be seeing Dad in like 10 days or something. He's totally getting resurrected next Tuesday, said her daughter, Jessica. She was perched on the couch, her legs curled up beneath her. I know, but he's back there in the past, all alone. Rachel stared down at her hands. She was wringing them worriedly. It was hard enough when we lost you so young, Jess, but now he's lost me too. I just don't know if I can take this. Oh my God, Mom, it totally doesn't even work like that, Jessica groaned. Time doesn't work like that at all. You just don't get it. Ugh. Rachel sighed, leaning back in her chair. As she did, she closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Ugh, what was she doing talking about time travel anyway? It was absurd. She was just a 7th grade biology teacher from Boulderville, Arkansas, not Einstein. She opened her eyes to look at her daughter, and instantly the tension eased from her head. Her daughter. Her beautiful daughter. There she was, alive and well. Rachel just stared at her for a long moment, feeling her heart warm. There had been times when she had doubted she would ever see her again. But there she was, right there. Her pastor had been right. Not perfectly right, but he got the important parts right. Jessica saw her mother staring. She rolled her eyes and opened up a musical holo. You're not getting sappy again, are you? Oh, I don't mean to, but you're my daughter, and I haven't seen you in over 20 years. Jessica groaned. She was still 17. For her, only a few weeks had passed since she had died in a car accident with her friends and been resurrected. Mom, it's been weeks since your resurrection. I get it. You miss me. I miss you too. But enough already. Just one more hug. Nopers, I gotta cut you off. Jessica bounced to her feet and skipped to the door. Hugs or drugs, G, Mom. No more. Just say no and all that. Anyways, I'm going to meet some friends at the beach. Just say no? Like the commercials? Rachel stared at her daughter for a moment before she remembered the commercials that had played in the early 80s. The Just Say No campaign to curb drug use. Oh, right. Just say no, she chuckled. That had been so long ago for her. But for Jessica, it was still current. All the time stuff made her head hurt. Jessica rolled her eyes. Later, Mom. The door slid open and she bounced outside. The door slid shut behind her. Rachel walked to the window of the small apartment and watched as her daughter walked down the sidewalk of the apartment complex. She felt her heart clench with fear watching her go, but she pushed it away. Jessica was safe here in the future. Even if she was hurt so badly they couldn't fix her, they would just resurrect her. She was safe. Outside, it was a beautiful day. They were still living in a temporal zone, as it was called. Jessica had died in 1983, Rachel in 2006. The year was now 2154, and apparently so different they wouldn't understand anything if they were exposed to present-day society straight away. So instead, the temporal zone was an area designed for people from the era in which they had lived to transition into society. And it was gorgeous. The apartments in the complex were built in a ring around a park, filled with the greenest grass she had ever seen, and a few pink-petaled cherry trees in full bloom, while overhead in the sky, the noontime sun sat like a yellow pearl in an azure sea. It was so beautiful. Rachel reached up and touched her eyes. Her vision was perfect now, of course. It had corrected to 20/20 within only an hour of her resurrection, as her body began to go back to a youthful, healthy state. Healthier, in fact, than she had ever been. And from what she understood, she could eventually look and feel however she wanted. But she liked her youthful self just fine. But none of this made her feel any better about the fact that it felt like her husband, Daniel, was still back in the past, all alone. She let out another heavy sigh, turned away from the window, and then sat down heavily on her couch. She picked up a pair of glasses resting next to her, virtual reality glasses. She slipped them on, and the room around her was replaced by virtual reality. She settled back into the comfortable couch and started sorting through the virtual reality menus, checking out the movies available. They were countless. A handy computer program told her which ones would make any sense to her. Rachel, she whispered to herself, you've got a lot of binge watching to do. She looked up some of the movies she had been watching before her death. It was interesting that there were now so many seasons. All the shows had been wrapped up, ended, canceled already. She had missed so much catching up to do. Rachel, she sighed to herself, you're just an old dinosaur. She took off the virtual reality glasses and tossed them on the couch. She just couldn't relax. She kept imagining what it was going to be like when Daniel was resurrected, the haggard look on his face. He would have been left all alone. A thought occurred to her then. Computer, she said, please, is there any way that I can see my husband in the past to let him know I'm all right? It is physically possible. The voice of her house computer emanated from the air. But there are laws in place to prevent temporal interactions. Rachel groaned. She wasn't Einstein, but she vaguely understood it. She wasn't allowed to travel to the past or even look at the past. Just the act of looking at something altered on a quantum level, photon bombardment or something. The best she could do was watch historical recordings. But her mother had said she shouldn't do that until Daniel was resurrected, something about collapsing her possibilities. But maybe, a new thought occurred to her, she could get some kind of special authorization. But who was she? Just a little teacher from Arkansas, and Daniel had been a botanist, neither of them rich or powerful. Computer, is there some kind of, Rachel chuckled ruefully, lawyer I could go to? Yes, a temporal lawyer may be able to help you apply for a special temporal visitation permit if your circumstances are found to be extraordinary. What? Rachel sat up. Computer, she said, a note of true excitement in her voice for the first time in days. Find me a temporal lawyer, a good one. Yes, ma'am, replied the computer. A change in scene. The office was small but comfortable, decorated with pleasant pastoral paintings and family pictures. Go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. The lawyer, William Lee, pointed to the seat in front of his desk. He then spun around the corner of his desk and sat down in his chair with a big grin on his face. Go on, sit down. Don't be shy, Mrs. Potweiler. He smiled, flashing perfect teeth. Rachel slowly sat down in the chair. It shifted beneath her, adjusting automatically to her body. She set her purse in her lap. Thank you for seeing me so soon, Mr. Lee. William Lee nodded amiably. He was a handsome Chinese man who looked to be around 27, but could have been any age, of course. He was dressed in a slick blue suit with a silver tie and ruby-studded cufflinks that glittered when they caught the light. He smoothed the front of his tie down. So, Mrs. Potweiler, what can I do for you today? Rachel darted a glance at the silent man standing in the corner of the room. He was dressed in a black t-shirt and worn blue jeans. His boots were work boots, covered in mud and paint. His eyes were hidden behind silver aviator glasses, and he was smoking a thick, hand-rolled cigar. What about him? She asked William nervously. William didn't even look at the man. That's just Mordecai. Don't worry about him. Yes, well, as you know, I want to visit my husband in the past. Give him some comfort. Let him know I'm doing okay. William nodded. Right, a common situation, you know. Many people want to visit relatives or loved ones in the past once they get here. Let them know how the afterlife actually works, or comfort them. He paused. Or other things. He grinned wickedly. Other things? What do you mean? You know. William's smile faltered as he realized Rachel did in fact not know. He cleared his throat. Well, lottery numbers, advice, things that would alter the timeline in their favor. That sort of thing. The The darker side of time travel, or temporal engineering as they like to call it.
Temporal engineering?
Time travel, sort of, for particles at least. But you know what? Don't worry about any of that. William leaned in, resting his elbows on the table. Let's focus on what you want. You want to let your husband know that you're in a better place, right?
Rachel nodded, fighting back tears for a second. Yes, I know he must be feeling so terrible.
William nodded slowly. But as you know, Miss Potweiler, the slightest contact with the past can cause ripples that could blow up the entire timeline. I mean, it's not really so fragile. Events have weight, really. You gotta push to change things. But what was I saying? Yes. He leaned forward even more. Do you really think it's worth it?
Rachel looked down at her purse. She could see Daniel's face in her mind. But this whole thing, the resurrections, isn't that messing with the timeline already?
Of course. William leaned back. But that's why the afterlife has to be so mysterious to past dwellers, so secretive, if you will. Why all contact has to be limited, so invisible, precisely because we are altering the timeline. And despite what they tell you, William leaned forward into a conspiratorial hunch. Just between the two of us, I'm pretty sure the entire timeline has been altered before. That's why our current timeline's history is so full of angels and demons and prophets and UFOs and whatnot. A patchwork mess, if you ask me.
Rachel shrugged. History's a mess, fine. She was rubbing her fingers together nervously. She stopped. But despite all that, I just want to, appear to him and let him know I'm all right. Is that so much to ask? I'm not trying to stop a war or anything, for heaven's sake.
William pulled up a hologram and swiped through it, checking data. Well, it looks like your husband is set to be resurrected next week. Why not just wait?
Because by then it will be too damn late, Rachel exclaimed. She closed her eyes and covered her mouth. I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. I just can't stand the thought of meeting him in the resurrection chamber and the look he's going to give me. How could I have left him alone like that all those years without at least trying to tell him to comfort him? She held back a sob.
William nodded as he watched Rachel closely, thoughts working behind his dark eyes. Right. He leaned back. You seem very emotional, very strong emotions there.
I'm sorry. Rachel cleared her throat. I'm normally much calmer.
Oh, no, this isn't a bad thing, not at all. William stared at her through narrowed eyes. It might be a good thing. Code 23434 Section A, right? Right, Morty? That true love law they passed a couple of years ago, I think.
Mordecai's head moved down slightly. A nod, Rachel supposed. He took a puff on his cigar. What do you mean, Rachel asked. True love law?
William leaned over and fished around in a drawer.
After a moment, he pulled out a strange device consisting of hundreds of very small brass knobs, all set in a kind of sphere no larger than an apple. He tapped it against the desktop and shook it a couple of times.
Here we go. This is what I'm looking for.
He tossed it to Mordecai without looking, and Mordecai caught it in one wide, hairy hand without seeming to look.
Go on, Morty, William told him. Test out Miss Potweiler's emotional neural network.
Rachel tensed up as Mordecai peeled himself off the wall and stepped over to her. She could smell him as he got close. He smelled like cigar smoke and forest timber. He silently stared, waving the little device all around Rachel's body. She leaned back and clutched her purse nervously, but he just kept going. What's he doing?
Just looking at your nervous system, how the nerves are connected, how thick they are, and everything, all that stuff.
But why?
So we can see how much you love your husband, of course.
Rachel felt her back stiffen. Well then, proceed. My love for my husband is unmatched.
William's eyes narrowed. We'll see.
Mordecai finished. He stepped back and looked at the knobby device. His expression finally changed. He took off his aviator sunglasses and looked at William.
She actually passed the threshold. True love.
William looked stunned, but he quickly shrugged it off.
Well then, Miss Potweiler, looks like we have a case.
Rachel looked around. What do you mean?
Well, you're a rare bird indeed. You love your husband so much and you're so sweet. I suppose that you might take damage if you aren't allowed to let him know that you're doing all right. And there are laws in place for such a situation. We'll pick up the rest of this chapter in part 2 in the next video.